around 2020, I started noticing that the Remicade was giving me terrible skin effects. I started developing like cystic acne all over my body, and I've never had issues with my skin. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, here I am. I'm eating really clean. I'm getting the best shape of my life. I feel fantastic, but I'm on this drug that's having these terrible side effects. So I proactively spoke to my GI doctor and just said, look, what do I need to show you to get off this drug? Because I know I take great care of myself. I feel amazing. I don't think I have inflammation. I went in for a colonoscopy. Not only was there no microinflammation, there was no inflammation, there was no microinflammation. And he said that because of the way that I take care of myself, the fact that I'm a younger guy, I'm strict with what I eat, he was comfortable getting me off Remicade. So that was literally a year ago. It was March of 2021. So I've been off of all drugs for a year, and I feel the best that I ever felt.
Brett, can you hear me?
Hey, yeah. Good morning. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing well. I'm sorry. I was cleaning up some ribeye juice. So I crushed ribeye before I came in, and I looked at it, and some of the, I guess the myoglobin and juice splattered all over the counter. So I was having to clean it up before I started this stuff. So anyway, I'm ready to go. I'm well nourished now. I'm ready to do an interview. So let me just ask you. Well, first of all, just out of this question. You go by, at least on Twitter, by a handle, I guess, Solazzo or something like that. It looks like it's like a gangster looking icon or symbol that you have on it. What is that about? Where does that come from?
Yeah, so it's a good question because I'm pseudo anonymous. So I know that you've had Texas Slim on your podcast before. So my TC, and so with the Beef Initiative, so my good buddy Harrison and I started actually ghostwriting for him on his blog, and he recommended just getting some type of like a pseudo anonymous Twitter account just in case, just because like we're going to be writing about big food and like the carnivore diet and stuff like that. So I've stuck with Solazzo on Twitter, and people kind of like the meat mafia shtick, but I mean, it doesn't really, my full name's Brett Ender, and I would pretty much post any of this stuff publicly as well. So I've decided, do I make it public or do I stick with the Solazzo account?
Yeah, well, maybe I need to go in hiding and have an account. I think it's too late for me at this point.
It's too late for you, 100%. You get a lot of vegans after you, but
anyway. Let me just get into it because you've got a really interesting story. And one I think we're going to see repeated over and over again, thousands of times, hopefully. But tell us a little bit about your background. I know you had issues with ulcerative colitis, I believe. And so kind of tell us a little bit, maybe your background, if you don't mind.
Yeah. And before I start, I genuinely do want to thank you, Dr. Baker. And I know I've posted about it on Twitter before, and we'll get into it. But a lot of the advice that I took from you, I think is really foundational and why I'm here right now and why I had such an amazing recovery. So that's why it's exciting for me to connect with you and connect with the Revero community. But yeah, so for me right now, I'm 27 years old. I'm living in San Diego. I work a tech sales job by day, and I really have an athletic background. So I played, I'm from New Jersey, Northeast guy, and I played baseball growing up competitively, great family. Mom was a great Italian cook. So definitely had like a plethora of home cooked meals, pastas, probably fell more into that like standard American diet approach. But I think the way that I always justified it was that I was an athlete. So I was burning a lot of calories, and that's how I could get away with it. Right. So, I was drinking the protein shakes, drinking the pre-workout. I ended up having about 20 scholarships to play baseball collegiately. And then I initially went to Seton Hall University, which is a small Division I school in New Jersey. And that's probably around the first time that I started noticing issues in my stomach. So I was about 20 years old. And it makes sense now looking back, right? Because I was eating whatever I wanted, a lot of fried food, a lot of pizzas, not sleeping great. Was, Friday, Saturday could be drinking, 8 to 10 drinks a night because that's just like the college culture. It was part of the baseball culture. And to be honest with you, I was putting too much pressure on myself with baseball and just, very stressed out. So that was the first period where I started noticing blood in my stool. And I got a colonoscopy. That was the first colonoscopy I ever got. I got diagnosed with proctitis. took a suppository for that. It went away within a few months, nothing crazy. After that first year, I transferred to Babson College, which is a small Division III school up in Boston, and really was just continuing the same thing: drinking too much, not eating great, stressed out, etc. And going into my senior year of college, this is the summer of 2016. That's really when my stomach started to severely deteriorate. So I was working an internship in New York City. I lived with my parents in New Jersey, so I would commute 2 hours one way, 2 hours home, so 4 hours total. And I started noticing blood in my stool coming back. And it sounds really stupid looking back at it. And I don't know if I was just embarrassed to tell my friends or my parents. I was like, oh, this will just kind of like work itself out naturally. So I just let the symptoms go on. And I mean, it literally got to a point where by the end of the summer, I was going to the bathroom probably like 20 to 30 plus times a day. Like I could not process anything. Straight blood, was throwing up blood. And it was ironic because the last day of my internship in August of 2016, I literally was on the toilet on the train for like 2 hours straight and almost passed out. So checked myself into the hospital, colonoscopy, and then I got diagnosed with full-blown ulcerative colitis. And I'd probably lost almost 30 pounds at that point. And so I go on the biologic Remicade because my stomach is so chronically inflamed. And they're telling me, look, because there's no cure for colitis, you're going to have to be on this your entire life. And you're going to have to get an injection every 6 to 8 weeks. And I think the medication was around like $50K per infusion, Dr. Baker. So luckily that was covered by insurance. And, that was kind of I just accepted that was going to be, part of my new norm. And the diet that they told me to follow too was like the classic low residue diet of white rice, bananas, like lean chicken breast. So it's funny looking back as like, that's the diet that they wanted me to follow. But anyway, go back for my senior year of school. Like anything else, I'm not drinking alcohol. I'm trying to stay clean with the diet. And then, I want to just enjoy my senior year. So I start drinking again, going back to the diet. And I just justified it that I was on Remicade and that all would be well. So, looking back now, I'm not anti-biologic by any means, because I genuinely believe that the Remicade did its job to get me out of that chronically inflamed state, but it only got me to a certain point. Everything really started to change for me in 2018. And the reason why I say that is that was the first time period where I was living on my own and actually starting to experiment with cooking my meals and like take autonomy over the food that I was putting into my system. So like I can remember, experimenting with just like ground beef, steak, chicken thighs, just like very simple dishes. And then I also started getting into endurance sports, like doing triathlons, doing some marathons, etc. But with these marathons, I know you're close with Zach Bitter. I'm doing all this carb loading and taking in all these gels and stuff, and my stomach just feels terrible. And I remember I did an Ironman I was supposed to do an Ironman in Lake Placid, New York. And I literally had such a bad flare up in my stomach, I couldn't even do it. So here I am, I'm physically looking better, I'm feeling better, but I'm still having issues with my stomach. And so everything changed for me in 2019. I was scrolling on Instagram and then I see Chris Bell, and I hadn't seen Chris in a while. I think I had seen him when he directed Bigger, Stronger, Faster. And I looked at his face and he looked like he must have lost like 80 plus pounds. It was unbelievable. And he was posting about this carnivore diet that he was following, and I'm like, okay, so all this guy eats is red meat, eggs, and water. Like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. And then by following him, I started following you. I listened to your podcast on Rogan, and I'm like, okay, well, now here's a surgeon that's having he's having amazing benefits from this diet. So it gave it way more legitimacy for me. And then on Reddit, people started posting there were a ton of people with Crohn's, colitis, IBS that were talking about the incredible benefits that they were having to this carnivore type diet. And that's when, all the red lights went off for me. And I said to myself, look, what's the harm in trying this diet for 2 weeks, right? I can do anything for 2 weeks. If I don't feel good, I'll just go back. So I literally remember like going to the Whole Foods in New York, getting all my meals. Like I'm living in this little shoebox apartment. So I'm like, I got the ribeyes on the cast iron. I'm setting off the smoke alarm and everything like that. And, I'm just getting more comfortable with this approach. And I literally noticed after a week, My gut in the amount of times that I was going to the bathroom severely decreased to the point where I was only going like once or twice a day. And I had never, prior to 2016, that had just never happened to me before. I also noticed too, my mood and anxiety, not that I ever had like anxiety or depression, things that used to bother me no longer bother me. I also noticed too that I could get away with working out a couple times a week as opposed to every single day. And I was making amazing gains in the gym, no stomach discomfort. My skin cleared up. It was like everything improved. So I did that diet for a month. And then I did a strict carnivore for another month after that, and it just had way better effects. And I would say now over time, I've just kind of like tinkered and experimented and found things that sit well with my stomach. So like I've noticed that raw dairy for some reason doesn't bother me at all. It feels great. So I'll throw in some raw dairy, like some milk, some cheese, some eggs, berries that are lower on sugar. So I would say that now I'm definitely more animal based. But then I use carnivore as like my baseline, right? And so like I've noticed every year I just get healthier and healthier, more into where I'm sourcing my food. And I think the best part about my entire story is that around 2020, I started noticing that the Remicade was giving me terrible skin effects. I started developing like cystic acne all over my body, and I've never had issues with my skin. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, here I am. I'm eating really clean. I'm getting the best shape of my life. I feel fantastic, but I'm on this drug that's having these terrible side effects. So I proactively spoke to my GI doctor and just said, look, what do I need to show you to get off this drug? Because I know I take great care of myself. I feel amazing. I don't think I have inflammation. I went in for a colonoscopy. Not only was there no microinflammation, there was no inflammation, there was no microinflammation. And he said that because of the way that I take care of myself, the fact that I'm a younger guy, I'm strict with what I eat, he was comfortable getting me off Remicade. So that was literally a year ago. It was March of 2021. So I've been off of all drugs for a year, and I feel the best that I ever felt. So it's an amazing story. Yeah, there is part of me that thinks, I thought that it was strange. I wish my GI had proactively brought up the concept of me getting off the drugs. I wish it didn't have to come to me like trying to push the issue. But, here I am, I just did my first full distance Ironman a few months ago. And, it's literally life-changing for me. And I've gotten a lot of my friends on a diet, and they've had similar success too. So that's a long-winded story, but I would say that's pretty much sums it up.
And it's a great story to hear. And it's not the first time I've heard this with ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. And it's something that I think is, it's a shame that many GI physicians will say the diet has no impact on this, and it's all just purely, we don't know what it's about. And I think that's a very sad situation. You mentioned the fact that the Remicade is very expensive, and most of these biologic drugs are very expensive. And it's, you said, well, insurance covers it. Well, basically, that just raises everybody else's premium. I mean, the drug companies are still getting paid. It's just we're all paying it in our premiums. And so, even though you're individually not responsible for it, we all end up paying for this. And so if there was a way to get people not to need these drugs, it would decrease the cost of healthcare across the board. The other thing is, as you probably aware, those drugs come with some potential downsides. When you shut down your immune system is what this kind of does. You're more susceptible to infection. You're more susceptible for cancer. There are some of the side effects that you mentioned. And so it's not even though it might make your quality of life better with regard to the ulcerative colitis, there are some potential downsides. And then many people find it over a period of several years that the medication loses its efficacy, and then you have to try a different drug or things don't work. So I'm glad you found something is working. I think it's also important to point out that, you are able to incorporate a few other foods. And this is one of the things that at Revero we're trying to figure out is like, what can someone with ulcerative colitis classically tolerate? Does age have an impact on that? Does, other factors, lifestyle, like you said, you exercise, does that have an impact? And those are the neat things that we're going to be looking to do so we can sort of give people the best advice we can give them, or at least tell them what you should be doing in addition to dieting. Like I said, I fully believe that exercise has a tremendously beneficial effect across the board, and it may allow us a little more leeway with our diet. And so that may be one of the factors that goes on with that. So now that you've been off Remicade for a year, what has the doc, I mean, have you been back to see the GI doc? Has he had anything to say or any commentary? Have you discussed diet with him, or what's been going on with that end?
So I guess the frustrating thing for me is when when I started this diet in 2019, I would go back and see him probably every 4 to 6 months, and he would always comment, "Oh, you look great. What are you doing?" And I would say, I'm on this low carb approach. I'm on this carnivore approach. Do you know anything about that? What's your opinion? And he really had no opinion about it at all. And I guess you know way more about this than I do, but I don't know if there aren't enough scientific papers for him to be able to endorse it. But it was frustrating because it was so clear that what I was doing was working and using my food as medicine. So, I am in the process. I don't know if I would love to try and find some type of GI that endorses a carnivore or low carb approach. I know I just got connected with Dr. Brian Lenskis, so I'm hoping that he can help put me in touch with some people out here in San Diego too. But the only thing that I've noticed since being off Remicade for about a year, Dr. Baker, is my stomach is just a little bit more sensitive to negative foods. So if I go out to eat at a restaurant and I have some seed oils, or I have a higher carb meal, or if I do have a little bit of alcohol, I pay the price more. So for me, I just focus on how good I feel on this diet. And the spicy food, the fried food, whatever, it might taste great temporarily, but the way that my stomach feels afterwards, having to recover and repair itself, it's just not worth it for me. So I really try and stick to this as quickly as possible, as closely as possible.
Yeah, I've got, there's a comment from Kat, who's one of our members, and she says her ulcerative colitis is much better in carnivore as well. She's still sensitive to a few things: collagen, cartilage, histamine, stevia, things like that cause a little bit of issue for her. So, we do see that, I think even though you're asymptomatic when you're on the diet, you're still relatively sensitive. So there's still that in the background. And it may be that several years down the road before it really clears up. There's a doctor, he's not local to you. His name is Pran Yoganathan. He's a GI specialist. He's actually in Australia, but he's very much a proponent of, dietary change and often carnivore diets for these things. And I've talked to him, and he said, he's seeing good responses to both ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease with diet, probably more so with ulcerative colitis. One of the things we hope to do, or we're planning on doing now that we're raising money, is doing some clinical trials. And I think two of the diseases we will be targeting are Crohn's and ulcerative colitis with an actual clinical trial. So we'll get that in the literature, hopefully see the good results that you've seen, and then be able to publish that and hopefully give more people, more physicians, at least awareness of this. And I think that's something that
100%.
So there's a question here from somebody, from Phil, who was just asking, were there any other things you did other than, because you eliminate a lot of garbage from the diet. Were there any things you added that felt like, some people talk about, does bone broth have a healing effect on the gut or anything like that? Were there any things you kind of consciously tried to eat more of? You mentioned raw dairy that you seem to think were, outside, like I could just say eat a bunch of ribeye steaks and good, but some people say, well, I want to feel like I need to add something to it. What is your approach been with that?
Yeah. I mean, so I throw a ton of grass-fed butter into everything that I eat. So like I will incorporate some bone broth. I'll just boil it, throw a little butter in, some sea salt. That's great. I'm kind of similar to that approach to you, where I like to probably smash like 2 to 3 ribeyes a day if I can, just like 2 to 3 big meals. I have some people, I know a lot of people with colitis and Crohn's, they might struggle with caffeine and coffee. I do like that fat coffee in the morning, kind of like that bulletproof style, while throwing some butter, some collagen creamer, some raw cream, whatever, blend it up and it tastes great. But yeah, honestly, for me, just a lot of really good red meat, sourced well, a lot of butter, some berries here and there. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'll just do 0 carb, and I feel fantastic, and my blood sugar's incredibly stable. But yeah, the red meat for me for sure is the biggest thing. And I would say that when I was starting this, when I wasn't as educated on sourcing my protein, I was eating more chicken. And the more that I've learned about the way that these birds are just primarily all fed corn and soy, unless I'm getting it from a local farm out in California, I'm just sticking to the red meat and some bison.
Yeah, I mean, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. Like I said, there's some people that they always ask me about, why aren't you eating a lot of chicken? I mean, it just doesn't really do much for me from a satiation standpoint, satisfaction standpoint. I had some recently occasionally. I stuck it in the sous vide. It actually turned out pretty nice and juicy, and it was decent, but it's still, 99 times out of 100, I'm going to pick a a steak of red meat if I have that,
Uh,
option. I'm fortunate to have that. Um, so what about family? Did they were any family members concerned? The typical thing, oh my God, you're eating red meat, you're going to have a heart attack. Did you get any of that pushback from family members or friends or anything like that?
I definitely did. So I think the perfect example of this is when I started this diet in 2019. I was working at a tech company in New York City. So, and I was in sales. So like a lot of people that I was working with, they'd go out, they'd get, pizza for lunch, do a happy hour for dinner, have a few drinks. And that was what was considered normal. So when I was starting this, I would show up to the office with a Tupperware container of ground beef or chopped up steak or something like a pound of it or a pound and a half of it. And people literally looked at me like I was crazy, like I was going to kill myself. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm trying to be respectful, but I'm like, here I am, I'm getting the best shape of my life. You're 30 pounds overweight. You're filled with anxiety. You're not happy, but you're trying to tell me how I should be feeling. So that's why I just think the self-experimentation is so important, because you intuitively know what works for your body, and you take a bunch of different inputs and just figure out the best approach for you. So, I definitely saw it at work. And even, there's a pressure to drink when you're out in sales, like wining and dining clients. I had no trouble with it because I would just focus on how, I would literally just have like a club soda and lime or lemon. And I would just focus on how good I felt on the diet. So, I didn't want to deviate. I knew that I would just focus on being in the hospital and how crappy I felt flared up. And so nothing is worth it for me to be able to have to go back to that state. So, that's what I did. And then also, the parents is tough too, especially when you go home. Like I mentioned, my mom's a great Italian cook. She makes a lot of pastas, a lot of dishes. Her and my dad definitely fall into that, that category of, hey, my dad's got high LDL cholesterol. He's on a statin. You got to be careful with red meat consumption. And so they didn't understand what I was doing at first. But now over time, they see the positive effects that I've had, the fact that I'm off medication. And now I can start to point them to people like you, who's a surgeon by trade, a doctor that's endorsing this, someone like Dr. Brian, someone like Tim Noakes, and it gives them a lot of credibility. So instead of me trying to go back and forth with them, I just try and send them helpful materials. And they've definitely come around to the fact that this approach has worked really well for me. And the other thing too, right? I also just think it's interesting the way that we're taught certain foods are good for you, but they don't necessarily agree with all of our stomachs. So like for me, the removal of dark leafy greens when I was recovering from colitis was huge, right? Spinach, kale, Brussels sprouts, broccoli. I started noticing beans. I started noticing these things were destroying my stomach, even tomatoes too. Like I love tomato sauce, but these things were just lighting my stomach up. And I literally just kept a food journal after every meal. How did I feel? What was my energy like? Did I have to go to the bathroom afterwards? And then I started noticing, every time I'm eating this, I feel like crap. And then every time I stick to this like primary meat, egg, fish diet, I feel great. I have consistent energy. And that's really how I found the approach that has worked best for me.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did that. That's like that information is valuable. And like I said, your experience may translate over to, many people with Crohn's and also colitis. And obviously there may be some differences again, based on some other factors, but that's good that you've done that. And that's like some of the data we've been capturing with our folks. And so we're trying to, obviously turn that into a working database that will help a lot of people. So the Meat Mafia, tell me a little bit about that. Cause I know, Texas Slim, I know I've interviewed him and I've seen a little bit around, and there's a lot of stuff. I guess kind of there's an overlap between some of the Bitcoin space and the meat space and all that stuff. So what's going on with the Meat Mafia, and how come I don't know about it yet?
Well, now, I mean, you might be the Don at this point, honestly, and you don't even realize it. It's still fairly new. So it's been incredible, the growth that we've had. I think I had 20 followers on Twitter in the beginning of January, and now I think I have almost like 7,000. But it really started, my buddy Harrison and I, we played baseball in college together. And then we got an Airbnb in Austin, Texas, because we were both fully remote. We did the Ironman together and lived together in Austin. And we started noticing that like we were just cooking all of our meals together. We were like, crushing steaks. He's very into this animal-based style of living too. And I feel like such a cheat code for this diet is if you can find a friend that's also passionate about this and helps you keep the other person accountable, And so we started realizing that like all we were talking about was like sourcing our protein and how good you feel. And then you start to go down the rabbit hole of like regenerative agriculture and big food and seed oils. And we basically left the 3 months saying we need to find some way to turn this passion that we have for this like primal style of living into something. We got to put the content out there. So he started ghost writing for Texas Slim. He brought me in to meet Slim. I started ghost writing for him. And then at the beginning of January, I literally just wrote a Twitter thread on my colitis, and it went viral. It blew up. I think you retweeted it. A couple other big people in the space retweeted it. And then from there, we've just been trying to just put out as much good content as possible, because I know for me, like with my friends and family, so many people are just uninformed about the stuff that they should be eating. They don't understand, when you go out to a restaurant, the way that seed oils are in everything. They don't understand what's actually in a lot of these like plant-based alternative products. They don't understand how red meat's actually, how good red meat actually is for you. So our Twitter right now, Dr. Baker, is we're just trying to put out as much good content as possible, help people. Like today, I just released a thread on tallow. I get asked all the time, hey, what type of cooking fat should I be using? And I know some people have issues with dairy. That's where tallow is a great fit. So, one end we're doing the threads. On another hand, we just started a podcast called Playing with Fire, where we're just exploring all the different tenets of ancestral health, just getting industry experts on to discuss things that have worked for them. So we just had Dr. Brian on to talk about how he's been using the low carb to get diabetic patients off insulin, which is incredible. And the way that whatever the Diabetes Association is finally implemented a low carb diet. And then we're also working on like sourcing and building a regenerative tallow product within the next couple of months that we're going to be hopefully being able to sell online and in stores. So this has gone from a passion to, this is what we want to be doing full time, because we want to help people, become as healthy and optimal as possible. It's what people deserve.
Yeah. So the American Diabetes Association, so you're referring to ADA, but I want to ask, because the seed oil thing is kind of controversial. There's some people that think it's basically from the devil. I mean, certainly, you can argue that, humans were never really exposed to seed oils prior to late 1800s when they really became, produced. And then they kind of, after Procter & Gamble sort of bought the American Heart Association off with $1 million, they started promoting it via Crisco back in the 1920s. And so there's a lot of people that blame problems on that. And there's other people that defend it vigorously and say it's not a problem. I.e. guys like Walter Willett out of Harvard, which, a lot of people think he's not particularly the best guy. But regardless, do you notice physically yourself if you're exposed to seed oil? Like if you go to a restaurant, most steaks are cooked in canola oil or soybean oil or whatever, or sometimes, whatever, it's avocado oil. Do you notice that? Can you tell a difference with your gut? Is that something you can notice?
So I feel like I've been getting more in tune and sensitive to it as I've been getting older. So I think the perfect example is there's been a few times where I've gone out to a restaurant. I just assumed that they were going to cook it in butter, which was a dumb assumption. And I stuck to the carnivore approach. I just had the steak and they cooked it in some type of seed oil, and my stomach felt terrible. Like it blew my stomach up a few times. So I've had enough of those experiences where, at least anecdotally for me, like if it's not butter or some type of oil or cooking fat that I trust, it really does. It lights me up for sure.
Yes, it's an interesting thing because you can go to a high-end steakhouse, and you're expecting, they're going to, I don't know what you're expecting. Maybe they're going to cook it in tallow, which they never do. They cook it in these seed oils. You go to McDonald's and they're cooking their hamburger patty on the grill with nothing. They don't use it because hamburger meat doesn't require oil to cook it with. You think about it. How many times do you put oil on your pan when you cook in a burger patty? It's fatty enough where you don't need it. And so it's kind of ironic because you could probably get less exposure to seed oils at McDonald's or Wendy's than you would at, Ruth's Chris or something like that. So it's kind of an interesting observation. There's a question about pork. Is that something that you do or don't, or does it bug you, or are you okay with pork?
Pork honestly doesn't bother my stomach. I know there's a lot of farmers talk about just making sure you're sourcing it the right way, make sure they're not too heavily corn and soy fed. Like I love bacon and eggs. I don't eat it a ton. I honestly, that fat coffee works really well for me. But if my friends are cooking up bacon and eggs, I have no problem smashing a bunch of bacon, and my stomach doesn't have any negative effects at all.
Let me shift over, because you mentioned you've done your first full Ironman, and a lot of people would say, well, you can't do these endurance events without a bunch of carbs. How are you managing those things?
Yeah. So the next evolution, I think, for me with the endurance athletics is really learning how to do those fat adapted. So the way that I trained for this Ironman in Texas is that I pretty much stuck almost strictly to the animal-based diet. And then I think similar to the way Zach does it, I implemented carbs on the race. I think where a lot of the endurance community gets it wrong is we focus so much on these sugars and gels and don't pay enough attention to the sodium that we're actually getting in. I'm like 190 pounds. I'm a heavy sweater. So I really made sure on the day of the race, because, I'm not fast by any means. I think I did a 14-hour Ironman, but you're going for 14 hours. It's a long time to be on your feet and riding your bike, running. I overdosed on sodium. And that was the first race in my life where I did not have a single cramp at all. And you see people that absolutely blow up on these races. I didn't have any issues. The cool thing about this Twitter and Bitcoin space is you connect with some very interesting folks. So I actually met a guy that I think you would be interested in talking to he did an 11-hour Ironman, completely fat adapted. And all he had were 3 hard-boiled eggs the entire day. So, and I had a 2-hour call with him just to suss it out, because I'm like, come on, all everyone talks about is nutrition. You need to take in thousands of calories an hour. And this guy got so fat adapted that he said he didn't even need the 3 eggs. He just wanted to put something in his stomach. And he learned from, have you met Pete Jacobs before? Are you familiar with him? Yeah. So
I've interviewed Pete before.
Okay. Yeah. So I think he learned the whole approach from Pete, and, had one of the best races of his life, completely fat adapted. So for me now, when I try and carb load, my stomach feels terrible that I don't want to do a race if I can't be fat adapted. So that's the next evolution for me in 2022 and beyond, is to really dig into that more.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a number of endurance athletes, even ultra marathon guys, 100-miler guys are doing it completely carb free. And, there's a guy, Charles Washington, who's a marathon guy. He's one of the sort of the original carnivore proponents who I think they still call it zero carb diet, but he runs marathons. He doesn't even drink water. I mean, he doesn't do anything. I mean, it's like he runs the whole marathon without even taking a sip of water. And, there's some thought that because, as you sweat off the water during your race, you become lighter, you weigh less. And so it's basically, you're actually able to negative split, because you're getting faster as you go on, because you're just carrying less weight, and you lose, 10 pounds of water weight. You start the race at 160, end at 150, and you're actually going faster at the end. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And we're seeing a lot of people pushing the envelope. Obviously Zach is one of those guys who has shown that through a low carb approach, you can be very, very fast and do those types of things. Are you seeing, are you finding you're seeing people with inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, reaching out to you? Have you interacted with many people, and have you heard any results of those that have sort of tried it?
So this is actually incredibly interesting. And I don't think this is definitely not a coincidence. People don't talk about Crohn's, colitis, IBS, et cetera, because it's embarrassing. People think it's embarrassing because you're talking about going to the bathroom. At this point, I don't care. I want to help people. I want to share my story. So I have no problem talking about it. The amount of people that have reached out to me that are in between 20 to 30 years old that have told me, hey, I have IBS. I go to the bathroom too much. I have anxiety. I have colitis, et cetera. It's been unbelievable. And I have multiple friends that have had stomach issues. I've basically written them up a template of this type of approach. And I'm not kidding. I've had dozens of people that have come back and said to me, this completely healed my stomach. I feel the best I've ever been. My energy is consistent. I'm getting in the best shape of my life. I'm like, all right, well, how many people do I need to tell me this to realize that there's clearly some legitimacy to this, and it's not just some one-off anecdotal experience?
Yeah, that is a struggle, because believe me, I've collected literally thousands of these anecdotes, and there's still people saying, well, it's nonsense and it doesn't work. And I'm just like, it's clearly obvious that for at least some people it does, and it's something that we should pursue. And again, we have to raise our own money to do the studies. I mean, this is the way it unfortunately works, because there's no one lining up. You're not going to get Moderna or Pfizer or GlaxoSmithKline to sponsor your meat study so they don't sell their drugs. I mean, it's not going to make sense. So I guess it's kind of a grassroots thing. let's, I'm getting a lot of people that, I'm kind of a, well, lightning rod for meat, I guess anyway, but there's a lot of people interested in meat sourcing. And I literally once a week, I get somebody saying, hey, I'm starting to start a company on meat sourcing and,
Mhm.
making a sustainable chain. And there's a lot of people into this space and interested in that. Where do you see it's going? And I don't know how much you are. I know Texas Slim has got a pretty big vision out there. I don't know how tied you are into that. You
Mhm.
mentioned sustainable tallow. Where do you see these things going, and what are you seeing actually happening on the ground in that space, or do you know enough about that to comment? I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I think that what COVID has done is it's really exposed people to a lot of just the metrics and things that are going on behind the scenes. And I know this isn't news to you, but I had no idea prior to a few months ago that there were four meat processors that control 85+% of all the meat that we're getting. So chances are, if you're in a supermarket, it's controlled by one of these four companies, and they're basically setting the exact prices that they want. They can artificially manipulate prices. And it's kind of helped to break the backs of these local farmers and ranchers. And the other thing too is just the marketing and the manipulation. I actually just interviewed a farmer in Colorado that said there's a loophole where you can be buying meat in a grocery store that's labeled as grass fed, but they can literally be finished on corn, and not only corn, they'll feed them like Skittles and candy and other stuff to just fatten them up as much as possible. Yet you're buying this label thinking it's grass fed and the best possible meat for you. So I know for me, like, number one, with my health, I personally just feel great when I'm buying the grass fed, grass finished meat. And I know it's just an anecdotal experience. And I also just love to support my farmers. So what I do is, like, in San Diego, I found a couple local farms and farmers markets, and I just go there and just source all my stuff for the week. So I go there on Sunday, and I've pretty much averaged out the fact that I think I consume like 14, 15 pounds of meat, and I just sample a bunch of different cuts. I have a local relationship with the farmer, so they'll hook me up with some type of a discount. And these farmers are so small; they're literally incentivized to take care of you, because they know that if they don't feed you a good product, you're never going to go back to them. Whereas, like, a big meat processor doesn't give it, because they're making billions and billions of dollars. So the way that I see it is, I think people are just waking up to what's actually going on behind the scenes, Dr. Baker. And I think we're going to start to see more platforms and companies that are going to be connecting you with this like hyper localized approach, because I think people realize that it's like, number one, it's the best possible thing to do for your health, to buy meat directly from a farm that was raised, the cows raised 20 minutes from you. The customization is incredible, and it's supporting a great cause. We just did an event in Austin, Texas, actually, with Slim, called the Bitcoin and Beef Initiative, where we just got a bunch of Bitcoiners in the room and connected them with some local farmers. And even just to have this one rancher come in the room just to talk about the fact that one of the things he mentioned, he goes, look, we don't let any drugs touch our cows. If a cow gets sick and there's antibiotics that are injected into the cow, we pull that from the line and don't sell the cow from public consumption. And I can tell you every single aspect of the cow's life. I can tell you what it was fed, what it was finished on. And it's just a different level of like customization that you're just not going to get buying it in the grocery store. So, that's my take on it. But obviously you have to do what's right for your budget. So, like, in the beginning, when I wasn't making as much money, I was going to the local supermarket and just buying traditional corn-fed meat. And guess what? That healed my stomach incredibly well. Now that I'm, doing better financially, I'm able to buy the grass-fed, grass-finished meat. But, you have to do what works best for you.
Yeah, and that's a topic I often get questioned about. And I when I try to say it, like, honestly, the data we have on human beings with regard to the difference in outcome don't show much. But there's not much out there. There's very few studies. I mean, people point to, grass finished beef has more conjugated linoleic acid, has a higher omega-3 content. It's got, it's richer in some vitamins, it's lower in fat, and on and on and on. And those things are all true. The problem is we just don't know if they have an actual true benefit in the humans with regard to clinical outcomes. Some people want to say grain finished beef is higher in monounsaturated fat. Maybe that's the better thing. We don't know. So that's been my approach. I just don't know. And the studies we have, the data I have, the data Harvard collected, didn't really show a major outcome. Like you said, you've got healthy eating supermarket beef, and I can point to literally hundreds and hundreds of people they're saying the same exact thing. It's because they're constrained by finances, and it's not that, a lot of people just don't have the freezer space, because you can get meat pretty economically if you're willing to buy it buy a half a cow or something like that, where you've got, get that down around $5 a pound, many cases for as an average. So it's an interesting thing. Um, do you get much pushback? I mean, I clearly have attracted the ire of the vegan community, because and it was something I had no intention of doing. I ended up for whatever reason Rogan put me on there and obviously exposed me to millions of people, and they all have their opinions on that. And I didn't set out to sort of push back against veganism. I was just saying, hey, look, this is pretty interesting. I'm seeing a bunch of people getting healthy, eating a meat-based diet. And then I immediately started getting attacked. And so I felt that, I had to dispel some of the misinformation, the disinformation, the complete propaganda nonsense that's coming out of these vegan camps. And so I've been fighting that battle kind of humorously ever since then. I think a lot of times I just do it as a kind of a humorous thing. But are you getting anybody pushing back? This is the hard thing I have is when somebody says, well, you're an awful person because you're eating animals and animals are dying, and they ignore the fact that gazillions of animals are dying for their crops anyway. But I'm saying, well, what about somebody who's sick like you, who's suffering, spending all day on the toilet, losing weight, literally, fading away to nothing, and going to eventually could die from this? What do you do with this? And they don't really have an answer to that. It's like, well, it's just junk food. You should, if you just cut out junk food, you'd be fine. You could eat a whole food plant-based diet and get the same result. Do you get pushback from those circles? I don't know if you've had enough attention directed your way yet. Usually it seems like a few vegans find their way into the conversation and want to preach to you about how bad you are. Are you seeing much of that?
I've started to see it more. I think I'm starting to get to the point where I think more people are starting to figure out my brand and persona. And I've also had some friends that have come at me a little bit. But I think what people don't understand is it's not. It's almost, I view it as like, I think big food is pulling the strings, and they want carnivores and vegans to fight with each other. And what I say is like, I'm anti big food too. I'm anti these huge meat processors as well. Like, I'm choosing to buy locally from my farmer. I don't think a lot of vegans actually understand the science of topsoil and regenerative agriculture and how good that actually is. And I'll literally say to people, look, I tried to incorporate more vegetables. I tried the dark leafy greens. I tried these vegetables, and they didn't work well for me. And I was whittling away to nothing. So what am I supposed to do? And I think you also, like you touched on it really well too, Dr. Baker, just the fact that, with life, death is just naturally part of the process. Like you get a thing of soil, there's a million living organisms in a little handful of soil. It's like all these bugs and insects and small animals that die to source your avocados and your plants. So to just turn a blind eye on that and then just focus on the cow is such a double standard. And I think it's also just a lack of information and awareness.
Yeah, the other thing, I'll just take this opportunity to dispel this. They often say, well, cows eat most of the crops. And so, if you weren't having cows, there'd be a lot less crop deaths. But, the reality is, and the data is pretty clear. FAO's got data. Cows eat about 33 to 36% of cereal crops that are produced. This is soy, corn, whatever. But that's a segment of the crop population. So it's not even a majority of the cereal crops. And then you don't have cows eating grapes and avocados and tomatoes and strawberries and cucumbers. That's not being fed to cows, other than, maybe the waste. There's some waste that comes there, and they might feed that. And the other thing is, like if you look at corn, the edible part of a corn for a human being, and some people would argue humans aren't designed to eat corn, but is, just the ear, and the kernels on the ear. You don't eat the cobs. The cow eats the whole plant. They eat the entire stalk. They eat the entire, everything. And so that sort of situation, again, it's such a small percentage that argument is, basically nonsense, but they keep making it again and again. And so I like to point out.
Your videos, by the way, my buddies said, we send text messages about this all the time. The videos where you'll have like some vegan activist in the corner and you just have this massive ribeye and you're cutting your steak. Please keep doing those videos because they make me laugh every time I see it.
Yeah, that's a little bit of humor, and that's the one thing I found that with the social media stuff. It's great to put up studies, and I put up a lot of studies, but they get very little. They don't get as much excitement, interaction, and we're trying to figure out make that stuff more interesting for people, because I find the studies very interesting, but then at the same time, it's about, we've got such a short attention span, and it's all about entertainment, and it's that's just the way things are, and so I've got to do that. Let me see what else. Mental health. You said there was an improvement in mental health. Is that something you noticed?
Definitely, yeah. And I've never suffered from depression or serious anxiety, but I would just notice, just going through life, certain things maybe would stress me out or give me anxiety. And I noticed an instant shift in my mental health within a week of doing it. And I notice it very strongly now if I ever go off my diet. Like, I went home for Christmas time, right? And I wanted to do an experiment where I was home in New Jersey for a week. So I just ate, I ate the Christmas cookies, I ate the carbs, I ate the starches, all that kind of stuff. And I noticed the things that used to not bother me were bothering me. And then once I went back on this carnivore approach, when I got back home, it all goes away. So it's like, what is that worth, right? To have complete peace of mind and confidence. And, I view this as almost like the pillar of your life, because you start to make better decisions. You start to be more confident. You start to make more money, I think, because of it as well. So it's like that plus sleep it's such a powerful combination. But yeah, mental health for me, it was huge, the benefits that it had.
How hard? You mentioned you lost like about 30 pounds. How long did it take you to put that back? And are you finding any difficulty maintaining your weight without any significant carbohydrate in your diet?
Honestly, not at all. Like, I'm close to, I'm around 6'1", 190. And like I went through an experiment where after I did the Ironman at the end of October, I wanted to just, lift weights and get strong. So for me, my diet has primarily just been red meat, some raw dairy, some cheese, some eggs, some fish every now and again, some chicken, but primarily red meat. And honestly, I work out 3 to 4 times a week, and I'm stronger than I've ever been. All my lifts continue to go up. My muscle is like denser than it's ever been too. And that's really what I started noticing, because I remember in college, you're just taught, oh, grams of protein, grams of protein, grams of protein. That's all that matters. But it's like, well, how well is your body actually using that protein? So honestly, sometimes if I don't have, I try and always cook some type of animal protein after a lift. But if I don't, I'll literally take a big glass of raw milk. I'll throw in some eggs, some cinnamon, maybe some honey, blend some cream, blend it all together. And it's like, there's like 40 amazing grams of protein in that your body is digesting and utilizing.
Yeah. And just speaking of that, are you, do you pay attention to how much protein you get per day? Because some people, I know, like if you listen to some of the folks from like the Paleo Medicina group who does treat ulcerative colitis and Crohn's, in fact, they have case reports written up on that. They are very much in favor of a very high fat approach, something like in excess of 80% of the calories coming from fat. Are you in that level of fat, or are you a little lower than that?
I think I'm probably a little bit lower than that. So like I do the fat coffee in the morning. So I do like a tablespoon of MCT oil, a tablespoon of grass-fed butter. And then, I'll do around like maybe a steak and like a pound of ground beef a day. So I'm eating them, 2.5 pounds of meat. So I don't know what the exact percentages are, and I'll have some cheese, and that's really what works for me. So, I don't go crazy with it. And that's one of the things that I really like about this diet, is that it's so easy to follow, and you start to notice your body intuitively works itself out. You eat until you're full, and then you don't need to eat for a couple hours. And then when you're hungry again, I eat, and it takes away this need for this like drip snacking on stuff that's not doing anything for you nutritionally.
Yeah, you mentioned, because you're having a fair bit of dairy, raw milk, grass-fed butter, some cheese.
Yeah.
Are you finding? Are you fine with all dairy, or does it have to be raw to work for you?
Yeah, I don't think, I even drank a lot of milk growing up, like pasteurized milk. I didn't have any particular issues with it. Really, it was just like ice cream that bothered me. And I just think it's because all the processed sugar and seed oils and stuff like that. But I have noticed with the raw, with all the really good digestive enzymes, and, it's milk as nature intended. It's not denatured at all. My stomach handles it incredibly well. So I've done an experiment this last week where I've had more raw milk and raw cream than I ever have. And I wear a CGM, and my glucose scores are the lowest they've ever been. Like, they never really drop into the 70s. and they're in like the 70s and 80s all day long. So I don't know if that might just be anecdotal, but I found that to be pretty interesting.
Yeah. Do you have any, and I guess you maintain a level of body fat you're happy with that, I suppose. Is that fair to say?
I'm probably around 10%. I mean, I'm definitely I'm the leanest I've ever been. I think, right now I would like to, get a little bit stronger and put on a little bit more weight, but I know that I'm sure you've had so many patients that have told you this, but it really is incredible when you just cut carbs, how the body responds to it.
Yeah, and some people have a tremendously good reaction. Other people, they feel lethargic and they don't like the way it feels, and they often, you know, they have trouble transitioning, and they often, kind of quit after a few days or a week or two, and so you can't tell if they would have ever transitioned or not. So it's kind of an interesting thing. One of the things about building muscle we know is that protein is obviously very important, as is weightlifting, but it also seems that uh, some component of fat or perhaps cholesterol is also important for that. And so, obviously you're getting cholesterol from, animal products. You don't get cholesterol in plants. They have a different structure. So there's no cholesterol, whereas we have that in every single cell membrane that we have. And so
Yeah.
it's quite interesting. We're running out of time already. Goodness, it's almost 10 o'clock where I'm at. So you are in San Diego now. And what are you doing there these days? You live there, you're no longer in the tech space, or are you still in the tech space?
Yeah, so I'm still in the tech space. Work traditional 9 to 5. So I'm doing that, and then in the free time, it's doing the Meat Mafia stuff and the podcasting, and just working on helping to source this tallow product right now. Another thing that we're working on too that we're really excited about. It's a little bit more longer term. Is we're really passionate about teaching our kids to eat the right way. Right? It's like you see in New York, they're switching to meatless Mondays and Fridays, which we think is, it's so screwed up. It's like, don't experiment on your kids. Like, if you're going to experiment on yourselves, that's one thing, but, starting to demonize, meat to our children, that's insane. So we're also trying to create some type of almost like a meat-based lunchable alternative to our kids, something with like some really good quality jerky, some cheese, some nuts, some honey, something where it's like, if you're a parent and you want your kids to be able to eat real food, but you don't have time to prepare a lunch or a snack, just give them something ready to go that they can either purchase online or get in a store. So, we're all in on this stuff, and our goal is to be doing it full time, by the end of the year.
Yeah, that's great. I think so. You're in San Diego. I may be coming there to speak in front of the California Cattle Feeders Association at the end of May in San Diego. So maybe we'll have to meet up for a steak or something if you're down for that. So
I would love
anyway,
taking a workout.
let me know. So, like I said, we're just about out of time. Let folks know where to find out more if they want to read more of your story, or you said you had blogs. You've got obviously your social media. Remind us where those things are again.
Yeah, I think Twitter is the best way right now, because that's where I'm putting out the most consistent content specific to diet and nutrition. And I have my whole colitis story on there. And I'm sure you'll link to the Twitter handle, but it's just at Mr. Salazzo on Twitter. And I've got my pinned tweet is my colitis story. And then my direct messages are open. So people send me messages about colitis and Crohn's all the time. So if anyone has any other questions or just want to learn about what's worked for me or what I've experimented with, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk about it or jump on a call and discuss it more.
Yeah, Solozzo is Solozzo. Is that how you spell it?
Yeah, it's Sollozzo.
But double L. Okay.
Double Z. Yeah.
Double L.
Got the Italian alias.
All right. Well, good luck with the Meat Mafia, and let me know if I can join. And thanks for doing this, and thanks for sharing your experience. And I'm sure we're going to make a difference in a lot of people's lives. So appreciate it. The rest of you guys, we'll be back tomorrow with another guest. You guys have a great day. Thanks, Brett. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Dr. Baker. Bye.